What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Phoenix channel. Thanks for tuning in to another amazing evening with your one and only homie Pleb on the EOS network. Today we got so much to discuss. I'm really happy you guys could make it. So without further delays, let's get into things, homies. And before we start, I just want to make a special shout out to all the homies in the Everything EOS channel. Great discussions today. We're not going to talk about price. This channel doesn't have any advertisements. There's no fancy graphics on here. So if you like this content, consider hitting that like button, consider subscribing. If you have a question, drop it in the chat. So there's a couple things we want to talk about today. One is this idea that it seems to some that EOS is evolving more towards a commodity versus a digitally unique token that is scarce. And so we're going to get into that, why we think it's a problem, what do we think needs to be done about it, both from the BP and community side, and obviously take some shots at what you guys all think about this, because obviously it's just my opinion, allegedly, and I don't know everything, so it's possible that there are differences of opinion, and that's what makes a community. You got different opinions, and hopefully you can find compromises with them. So first topic, EOS as commodity. Why do I say that? Well, if you guys remember back in the day when EOS launched, which was back years ago now, the mainnet, there was a huge collection of BPs, community members doing videos, developers. You had all these market participants, investors. Okay, so you can kind of break up this dynamic within those different roles, but essentially all these people were focused in on EOS, making it better, marketing it, developing apps for it, solving problems for it, getting education out there. Everything was geared towards EOS. And over time, because of the maybe perceived lack of funding available, I think it was mostly money, portions of the community started to deflect in different directions. And so a segment of the population went to Telos, and some went to Wax and Ultra, and some guy had his wallet project, and some folks went there. And so slowly over time, you saw this dilution of community members, and moreover, you also saw other roles also get diluted. So community is just one, community being market participants maybe that invest in tokens. You saw them start to diversify into these other tokens and moon, which I hate that term, by the way, but you saw them go into these other projects and try to support them because they thought there was a better opportunity there. Maybe they could make some money. But you also saw block producers, aka BPs, right, also take on this opportunity by spreading themselves, not only to focus on EOS, but Telos and Wax and Ultra and all these other projects. And obviously, as humans, whether you're an investor, whether you're a block producer, whether you're a developer, whether you're even block one, it could be argued that everybody has finite resources as humans, particularly time. That's something that no one can argue. You have a finite amount of time on this earth, and you choose how to allocate it. So naturally, by spreading yourself over across many different things, many different chains doing different things, you're partitioning then your time and focusing on all those couple different things versus one thing. And so that leads to dilution in money, right? In time and sweat, in resources allotted to improve on one thing. And sadly, for a lot of the projects, there are some that are still surviving, I guess, by thread. And maybe they're pumped and dumped because there's not really any and a real demand for them, you know, basically they've just eroded to zero. There's no volume in them. There's no demand for them. And so sadly, I think for a lot of the maybe the newer plebs, you know, I had been through this before, and so I got experience in that with Ethereum, and so that was back in 2016, 2017, and luckily for me, I didn't fall into the trap of throwing all the Bitcoin I had started from very early days and all that stuff. But sadly, I think a lot of the younger EOS plebs, you know, people knew this space, fall in that trap. And a lot of the BPs, I think, did too. And so now what you're seeing is a situation where there's a lack of money for a lot of these market participants that chose to go that route. And so that's not a really a good situation in my mind, but unfortunately that's what happened. Now, the fallout to that, even for people who still hold EOS, is you've lost all those market participants. They're not going to come back because a lot of them lost stake in their network, or they had maybe a runway, a strategic runway of maybe a year, 18 months, 24 months, whatever you want to call it. And now they're out of that runway. They're out of funding. They've exhausted all their funds. And so that's a problem because you've lost all that network momentum that had grown over a 2-year period. That has been eroded because it got diluted and shipped and siphoned off to these other networks that are basically, a lot of them are worthless. I know a lot of people won't like when I say that, but that's the truth. Now, even more interesting is you have a lot of BPs, EOS Nation for one. Shout out to EOS Nation if you're watching this video, who also defected and did some other ancillary services for these other chains and still does to this day. And so I think in the argument I just laid out that logically there's a dilution in energy, time, resources that are allocated to the EOS mainnet. And so we've seen stifling, we've seen some lack of prioritization in key activities that need to happen for a chain that is looking to be highly performant, looking to be best of breed, looking to take the crown, smart contracts, and make the case for institutions and developers to select across a whole host of networks. And sadly, what's even more interesting is a lot of these participants fail to realize that in spreading themselves across these other chains, they've essentially commoditized themselves because, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more. Shout out to Rezi, who was discussing this with me, but you know, if you have 3 gas stations and you have gas station A, gas station B, gas station C, 3 different gas stations, they're kind of in your town, and you can go there and pump your gas. The gas that is provided to those gas stations, they're all provided by the same oil producers. But one gas station has his price at $10. The other gas station has his price at $5. The other gas station has his price at 50 cents. Which one are you going to choose logically, just as an intelligent human being? You're getting a commodity. You're getting it from the same producer. He has the same reputation. You're probably going to select the station that has the cheapest gas because reputation-wise, you're getting the same service from all the stations. It's illogical to go to a gas station that's charging you $10 for something when you can go to another gas station from that same producer and get it for 50 cents. It's just stupid. So in my book, and a lot of people don't like that, but in my book, they pretty much diluted themselves in making a model for EOS because now they basically became a prostitute for these other chains, and there's nothing unique about EOS. The producers on these other chains, their reputation is spread amongst these other chains. So why would I value something that is commoditized? Why would I even value what you do if you're everywhere and it's on all chains? There's nothing unique. There's no unique experience there from a BP perspective. And sadly, because the community has eroded and diluted as well, there's not the network effect that you would have within the community, within the EOS community, over these other chains because a lot of people have defected. You don't have the buildup of developers who are looking to build on that. You track metrics like jobs, listings for EOS developers. It's not there. So whatever metric you look at, people may not like that type of a discussion, but this is just keeping it real because we keep it 100% here. Before we get into more of the chat, I'm going to do a couple shout outs here to the folks on the chat who showed up. Shout out to Sandman, Mr. Fatface, who's making fun of the Pleb Series because you know we keep it 100, and Rezi. So Rezi let me know in Spanish it's plebes, I think. Did I say that right, Rezi? And he says money is energy, TCP/IP. That's right. So I guess the main question is EOS a EOS IO EOS, you know, is it a variant of a TCP/IP, or are we, you know, is the community as a whole and all the block market participants looking to create digital scarcity of value? Because right now, you know, throwing out all these EOS IO chains with the same producers, there's not anything actually unique about it, and you're just making a infinite, I guess, source of servers and systems that someone can use for an app. There's nothing unique about it. Now you could say, someone could look at EOS and say, well, you know, Phoenix, EOS still has liquidity. And yeah, I mean, okay, yes, in the relative within the EOS sphere and echo chamber, yeah, EOS has a huge amount of liquidity relative to Telos or Wax or Ultra, whatever these shit tokens are, shit chains are. But in the grand scheme of things, even the liquidity argument at a high level is eroding rapidly because now EOS is in 14th place. Well, you know, that is actually less than a lot of other third generation smart contract platforms. And in that perspective, what is unique about EOS over other smart contract platforms? Like, why would someone choose EOS over these other ones? You can't, you know, you're no longer able to say, well, it's because of liquidity, is my point. We can look at maybe and say, well, the technology is better in some aspects, and maybe it is and it's not. But from a liquidity standpoint, it's very rapidly losing the argument of, you know, having any say on holding a crown because it doesn't have the market cap. It doesn't have the market cap to do maybe some of the unique things that some people would hope it would do. And so one of those things might be, for example, a lot of people have speculated that EOS could one day be used to scale Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin's market cap is how much, guys? Bitcoin's market cap is in the 300 billion, maybe 400 billion soon. Okay, EOS has a market cap of a few billion. So think with your heads, guys. Logically, you can't put more value of Bitcoin more than the market cap of EOS because then it becomes a security issue. Like, you can't, like, at some point it becomes, you incentivize the block producers who are these market participants, you know, producing these blocks to maybe do something they shouldn't because the value of the Bitcoin becomes more of a honeypot for them versus the value they put at risk, right? So there's all this game theory stuff. So really, EOS, in a way, by not having the market cap and potentially even the liquidity soon, you're not going to be able to do those unique applications, at least based on the current framework that we're seeing. You'd have to see the market cap and liquidity rise substantially so that these applications can actually function correctly. And that's just one example. So goes on to the next point here. EOS model is challenging given the regulatory space. And I know you guys are going to roll your eyes at this, pleb, and I get it. But consider this. Bitcoin itself is a store of value type of proposition, right? That's the narrative, that's the framework to another pleb, a mainstream person. You want to store your money, you want to save your value, your sweat equity that you put into something. You buy Bitcoin, you store it there, you don't transact for it for maybe years, and then when you're ready to buy something of passion or of value or something you honor, then you take the Bitcoin and you go buy that thing, right? Well, for that type of a environment, I probably don't really care so much about transaction fees because I'm not buying and selling or moving tokens rapidly. And I certainly don't, I'm not as burdened by the regulatory market in terms of reporting because I bought and I sold. And so there may be only one, two, or a few transactions that are involved in my store of wealth um, decision, right? With something like EOS, where you have this thousands of tokens type of mindset, you're going to have all kinds of velocity with tokens running to you and to your friends and in the gaming environment across all these reinvented applications. Well, how's that supposed to work from a regulatory standpoint? Do you guys really think that an average mainstream person is going to go through the burdensome task of tracking thousands of transactions to use a decentralized Uber? No. So in order for something like EOS to work, there really needs to be United States government coming to the table, willing to work with this new model. Because without that, this all kind of just doesn't work from a mainstream perspective. No one's going to go through the headache of filing all these things for thousands of transactions and basically be put to be seen as guilty until proven innocent, right? For just using new technology. It just doesn't make sense. It's the antithesis of an adoption case. And so we have to be real with that. But there's also some things that internally are challenging because we have an evolving landscape. And so right now, guys, if you're not aware, we have two changes that are occurring on the network, kind of in flux. One is the resource model, which there's actually a channel for those that are interested in Telegram. It is the new resource model, I believe. And I believe the folks, EOS New Resource is what it's called. EOS New Resource Model. So you guys can look that up. And so there's some, a couple select plebs in there like myself, along with some notable characters from Nation and New York, and some others having some discussions about the resources. And so I'm, kind of a staunch character on, I think, my view on, I guess, the importance of resources. And a lot of people are not going to like this because I know a lot of people were burned by the resource issues with the EDIOS app or whatever occurred on the network. But I don't personally feel like resources are the number one priority for this system. And I'll tell you why. So currently today, EOS as a network, irrespective of the resource model, EOS as a network, at its best, can do 4,000 transactions per second. So let me ask you guys this, and there's some other constraints with that. If you look at the net and these other aspects of it. If you look at that, I guess my question to you is, does this change allow the network to deploy a mainstream application? It doesn't. It may mitigate some of the issues, but you can see that there's going to need to be some ultimate next change. And so with that change, first of all, changes are not good for a monetary system. And regardless of whether people like it or not, like these participants, like select BPs who were duking it out with me this evening, regardless of whether they like it or not, you're building a monetary network. And so when you're making all these changes to a monetary network, you have instability, and what if we do this and what if we do that every fucking 12 months, 6 to 12 months? Customers and other market participants, that's not good. That's just all these changes they reinforce, they restart the clock on establishing stability for a system. It's like if you're building a control system. You guys ever done that? If you build a control system, I don't care what system it is. You're going to build a substation, you're going to build a car control system. You better make sure that thing is ready to go. And so when you make changes to a system, there's usually a period of time where you go through extensive testing, but then even after you deploy it, there's sort of this gray area ahead of when it's sort of determinate to be stable. And for physical systems, that there could be a period there, maybe you say a year, and you go through multiple tests every month, or you do certain simulations. For this type of a complex digital system, I don't even know what that time frame is. You might be looking at 5 years to establish that type of stability, monetary stability, right? Monetary system, you're establishing that it's predictable, it works as it's intended. And so each time that change occurs, you're really restarting the clock. It's like in basketball when you have the 24-second shot clock. Really what you're doing when a person like US Nation or Block 1, for that matter, starts throwing up and jizzing all these ideas on a blackboard. By the way, without empirical, I haven't seen yet a peer review type summary of the simulations done to prove out that this model actually is in everybody's best interest. It raises some questions about that, and you're going to have a period of time that's going to continue to be questioned by major market participants. And so you could have maybe VCs come in, or some small time token holders, plebs like ourselves, but you're never going to get that real money until you're able to definitively show that the system works as intended and it aligns the incentives of all the users on the network. It actually makes sense for everybody. And so I don't know if that's been proven. And so a lot of these people are running blind and looking at this and saying, maybe let's do this, or everybody's on board, but I don't actually know if the work has been done to prove that it's actually needed. It solves the problem. It solves a problem that is a major priority on the network. Because, again, 4,000 transactions per second, I'm sorry, guys. Maybe I'm going to come off like an ignorant pleb, but it just doesn't make sense. It's illogical to think that 4,000 transactions is going to allow you to accomplish something meaningful on the network that can't be done right now with maybe some compromises or some workarounds. It's not going to get you the step change you need to go from, plebs to mainstream. It's just, you don't have that scalability yet. I don't think you haven't seen that solution. So, I may be missing something here, and maybe it's a communication problem from Block 1. I'd like to better understand how this change basically flows into longer-term vision for how EOS as a mainnet scales, because right now there hasn't been that explanation. And just assuming that you're going to make this change and somehow it's going to be ready for prime time, I'm not seeing it. So why is this actually needed? No one's been able to prove that. So before we get to more discussions here, let's go into some of the chat here. KVR is checking in. Yo, Phoenix, you should come on the Block Crafters channel with me and Pickle tomorrow. I'd love to do that. Talk some crypto. Sandman says EOS is more for the back room of corporation. Average Joe will never deal with the coins or worry about taxes. And I know that, but I guess what I'm getting at is, if you have a system where you have these tokens, a tokenized economy with these apps, and that's what the idea with EOS was. You're going to have thousands of these apps running these tokens. That doesn't work without a friendly regulatory environment. So it's kind of the antithesis. This environment we're in right now, it's the antithesis of what EOS would need to flourish as a community or as a society, having developers want to build on it, and so on and so forth. So Mr. Fatface says, what is the rumor of what Block 1 will announce on December 14th? I don't actually think they're going to announce anything. Um, First of all, well, a couple things there. I think a company like Block 1 at this point would probably put an announcement upon an announcement. And to my knowledge, and I could be wrong here, but there hasn't been any such announcement. So if there was really going to be any announcement by the end of this year, we would have already seen the announcement. Otherwise, the communication person isn't just doing their job. So regardless of what it is, I would say that I wouldn't put too much into it personally. And doing so, you might even get disappointed. So that's kind of what I think about that. So there's, significant cost to making these changes. And again, I haven't really heard of a reason to actually move forward with the resource model other than there's going to be some short-term maybe gains, perceived gains, and usability. It's going more towards a rental model, but again, I don't know if that solves the ultimate step change that you need in the network. It just simply maybe causes whack-a-mole. You fix one problem or you fix a perceived problem that you created in your head, and you go to this rental model, and now you're also introducing more regulatory risk for market participants because now over time you're receiving or you're having to make more transactions as a user. And so I'm not sure what I think about that. I guess someone could argue, well, you have that on Ethereum. Yes, that's true. I don't know. It just that wasn't what EOS was, I guess, proposed to be. We're supposed to own the resources, and once you own the resources, you were supposed to be able to use your stake to leverage the network. And so this strips that value of the token in a sense, from a utility perspective. Now, some could argue, well, you get rent and all this stuff, and yeah, that's true, but I didn't sign up to. I guess a lot of people didn't sign up to do that, and it's sort of putting folks in a odd position without the regulatory certainty. So I think Block 1 really needs to step up. I mean, in this case, I would say the community needs to step up, but that's kind of at that level, you sort of need to have the discussion with a higher level order within the government to educate them on this and get some clarity for the users. Otherwise, this technology is useless. Really, that's what it comes down to. Now, there's also some changes to the mainnet that are proposed by Dan Larimer, and coincidentally, some in the chat, in the resource chat, argue that the resource proposal came first, so that's what they had. Interestingly, Dan Larimer had posted about the governance proposal earlier than the resource model, I think by over a month. So in my book, this is a big issue for the network. And so I guess, why is it a big issue for the network? Well, right now, you guys know that we have what I would call obfuscation in the chain voting and chain dynamics. So you have non-transparency in the voting process through these exchanges that take tokens from users, sometimes willingly, sometimes not. But there isn't really any transparency on what the users of those tokens on that exchange actually want. Now, some have argued, well, they've consented to that by using the exchange, and maybe that's true. But if you want billions flowing into a network, folks want to know why it is the case Block 1 votes for entities which take tokens on exchanges not owned by them to vote themselves in a network for profit. That just seems like a very short-term mindset, short-term type thinking, and it appears very irrational when considering the cost versus benefit versus risk of the actual token holders So it's really a failure in my book. A Block One and some other participants that encourage that or think it's okay to honor what I characterize as user equity in the EOS network. So obviously, holding EOS tokens does not provide you equity with Block One, but currently today, holding EOS tokens, you're supposed to have representation on the network through the governance system by voting for BPs. You're supposed to have resources on the network, which particular characters on EOS are trying to strip away currently and haven't actually made an argument why the change is needed. So I guess, what is the real value proposition of holding EOS if you're not able to accomplish governance, proper execution of resources, or honoring of resources? To me, it just seems like a complete failure and a lack of focus and priority by select market participants. And so I can understand why a lot of people outside EOS, outside the echo chamber, I call it, don't view or take EOS seriously, because you have folks that fail to understand the perception and failure to honor users' tokens and not making that a priority with select exchanges, whether it's a Block One reaching out to the exchanges and making sure that they have the tools to provide that radical transparency. I mean, that's what blockchain is all about. So just simply saying that, will someone sign off their rights and allowing the exchange to vote with them, that undermines the very foundation of this technology. So, that to me is not acceptable. Sandman says, so dumb to leave it on exchange. You can vote to a good proxy and make 3 to 4%. And I think that's true. I think the challenge, though, is just the technology hurdle for a lot of people. They don't want to take that risk in self-custody. So really what you're going to have to see, if Block One is serious about this, if the BPs are serious about this, really what it comes down to is saying and telling those exchanges, or maybe reaching out to Google, and Google allegedly is coming out with some type of private key management system, according to Bloomer, allegedly, and maybe that ties into some type of a self-custody voting proxy system for those users. But I think it's up to Block One to actually help lead the conversations along with select BPs on what the expectations are, set the standards. If you went to a job or I went to a job and I had no standards or time frames on certain things getting done, you and I would both be fired. And everybody on here knows that. If you just go in and open-ended, have a subjective roadmap without actual goals, or you're not transparent with your participants or stakeholders you're working with, that type of relationship fails. You probably would be fired. You probably wouldn't even have a job. So why is it acceptable for other entities to operate in that type of way? That to me just doesn't seem acceptable. So, that's my take on it. I'd love to hear what you guys say. Eddie says, if people leave their tokens on exchanges, they've consented. There should be an incentive to vote for yourself. I own the tokens. I can do as I wish with them, but incentivizing accounts to vote will change that as people do what they're incentivized most to do. And that's true, but I just think that as a network, there's a huge opportunity in being the first network with radical exchange transparency. So you basically would have systems in place to ensure that you don't have exchanges voting on behalf of their users without their consent. You at least give the option for those users to choose and elect who they want to vote for and make sure those interests are aligned. Because what's happening right now is you have maybe a lot of those BPs who don't have the interests of EOS at heart. They're in the top positions, and it's very hard to know what they're doing there. So either the communication is lacking in terms of what value they're providing, or they need to get removed, because we just haven't seen the evolution of EOS occur as it needs to, especially with this voting process. And I think that's a problem. So what Dan Larimer proposed, which by the way was all the way back in November of last year. So we've been here for 1 year, guys, and you mean to tell me that EOS is hyped to be this chain that is supposed to evolve very quickly and make changes rapidly, but it's taken a year and we still don't have governance with Dan Larimer's proposal, vetted, written up, a formal proposal out. They haven't even started the process. So what have they been doing? And shout out to the public, whatever, the Kevin Rose. What has he been doing with it? Because it's been there for a year. So to me, it just doesn't seem, again, like there's a serious attitude about this stuff. And so if you're going to mess with my money, and the plebs' money and other people's money, big market participants, and you're going to expect people to be okay with that's not going to work. That's not how the society works. You have to come in with an attitude, and you have to come with deadlines. And yeah, you could miss the deadline, and that's fine, but you have to shoot for something. You have to put a goal. You have to provide the market some signals, put some smoke signals in the air. You can't just willy-nilly just say that it's in the background and blow somebody off, because it kind of comes off as disrespectful, actually. And so there's an obfuscation in the voting process, but there's also an obfuscation in the evolution of the chain and the transparency in how decisions are being made. And so people want to know if they're putting their money in something, the type of influence they have, the respect they have, and I just think we're not seeing as much of that in EOS over other opportunities. And so at the end of the day, there's opportunity cost involved with EOS versus holding Bitcoin or something else. And so people are going to make those options, and the market is speaking. That's why EOS is dragging, in my opinion, and it's a wake-up call for folks like Block One and other block producers to kind of wake up. So I don't know what you guys think about that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Those are the two major changes that are, I guess, up in the air: the resources and the governance. But again, with any of those changes, the clock restarts for a lot of these large institutions. So you're looking at a couple years that they want to see in maturity. And so I'm not personally convinced the resource one in particular is something that is actually needed. I think the governance one would help mitigate some of the issues we're seeing with the exchanges who choose to use users' funds, because what it would do is you'd have 10-year pools, 5-year pools, and the cyber hornets of the EOS network could come in and call the exchanges bluff, because what could happen is the cyber hornets could come in and put into their tokens within the 10-year stake pools and gain a substantial weight within the network and start to gain influence and respect within the BP rankings. That is probably the anti-thesis or against a lot of the interests of select individuals, and I think that's why they haven't elevated and prioritized this. I think they realize it's not in their best interest to do that. And so I think Block One needs to take a look at some of those players and really come up with the game plan on how to squash them, to crush them at the opportune time. If there's not going to be deadlines and priorities for certain things, you need to show the market and teach a lesson to those people and take them out, because that's what happens with Bitcoin and other networks when market participants decide not to behave as they should in the best interests of holders. So, I'd love to know what you guys think about that. That may sound radical to some people, but, it's put up or shut up time. So, Mr. Fatface says, what are your thoughts on the rumors that B1 is about to get bought or acquired? I mean, it's possible. It is very possible. I mean, they're at a $4 billion or less market cap, and you have a lot of companies with a lot of cash. So it wouldn't surprise me. But at the same time, I mean, there's so much potential, and it would actually be pretty sad because it's probably the last time you'll see a blockchain company be able to raise from plebs $4 billion and have the potential, not the promise, but the potential to do something really amazing. And it'd just be such a shame if we didn't actually see that emerge. So Rezi says Phoenix is the new fees. He don't need no songs. Yeah, I ain't no songs here. Um, Crypto Media, shout out to you. Getting my EOS out of Rex. Mr. Fatface says, dang, some hard truths to be told. Please end it on a good note. It's, truth hurts sometimes, but we got to have these discussions to change the narrative and the fabric. And B1 need to work harder. Sandman says EOS is going to be amazing. The patient man are buying 250 all day long. Rezi suspects that B1 is busy convincing other big names to become BPs. I don't know about that. Brendan Bloomer mentioned that I guess they're continually talking with other companies and entities, but in order, I think, for a lot of institutions to take something like EOS seriously, there has to be that stability, and you have to have proof of transparent market dynamics. And I've already mentioned to you guys, especially with the governance and particular players in there, that continues to be an issue. And so I think that's the number one challenge for EOS. And I think that the positive note would be if we can see block producers such as EOS Nation realize that and acknowledge that their focus should be on the governance and not the resources, I think then I'll have a more positive note. But until then, folks like myself that are investing like thousands a month on blockchain, like crypto, I won't be putting any money in EOS. I'm not selling my EOS, but kind of like Colin Talks Crypto, I won't be putting any additional money in EOS because the focus and the attitude just isn't where it needs to be. And sometimes that's what you need to do as a market participant. And maybe it even means at some point selling it. I'd like to know what you guys think about that. But, the issue I have is that some of these influential BPs, they seem to have an attitude that community money is not at stake. There's no opportunity cost for market participants. And the resource issue is a higher priority over network influence voting. And that's just not true. If a percentage of your stake, of your money, is at risk, you better care how the network prioritizes the changes, and you probably care about how the influence is being distributed so that one entity doesn't start taking advantage of everybody else. So no large entity wants their money network influence weight in the hands of other entities which have an unfair advantage due to their use of users' tokens in an unauthorized way. And I think that is one of the fundamental issues with EOS. And so let's see if we can solve that problem, guys. But until that is, I guess, acknowledged, heard, and says, oh, yeah, we acknowledge you, we hear you, and we're going to make this our number one priority, and we're going to squash it. And we're not only going to squash that issue, we're going to squash any of the BPs that undermine this process. Then you'll actually see plebs show respect. You'll see market participants, cyber hornets, come in and show respect. But until that happens, I think it's a little bleak. So Google's still not in the top 21. And how about these influential BPs? Yeah, so I think that is a good summary of where things stand. But what do you guys think? What do you guys think about where EOS is right now? What are some of your thoughts? We got about 5 minutes, and I'd love to hear you guys rant a little bit. And moreover, would any of you guys be able to do a Zoom chat? Because that's where I'd like to take this channel next. This EOS Pleb Series, I'd like to have ongoing discussions, more dynamic discussions with you guys, where it's not so much a rant, but it's actually more of a community forum where we're all combining ideas and giving our take on certain things. Because I think without these types of discussions, it becomes an echo chamber in some of those forums in Telegram, and I think it's done that way, sometimes engineered that way to facilitate a certain outcome, which may or may not be in your interest. So we got to make sure that we keep the narrative going, we get the communication out, and if it means twisting some arms and getting some publicity out there, that's what we have to do. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in to this channel, EOS Pleb Series Volume 1, and look out for the next edition coming out probably in about a week. We'll see what happens in a week. I know Block 1 is scheduled to make some presentations, I guess, on digital currency and introducing EOSIO to broader community, but none of that is actually product based or new technology. That's more just regurgitation of theoretical considerations. They're not actually actively working with anybody to create actual digital money. So don't get your hopes up too high. You have to, kind of keep everything in perspective. Mr. Fatsface says, "Oh well, it's tapped, but if there's one thing B1 could throw money at for the greatest returns, it would be that." Oh, DeFi and EOS is the ultimate on-tap potential. It's possible, but again, I'm just not seeing that communication and priority by market participants like B1. And I think part of the problem also is that, as a developer, one positive thing, okay, we'll leave it on a positive note. One positive thing I will say is Peter K series for EOSIO is actually pretty good. I've been doing that now for a couple weeks, and I would say the structure is pretty intuitive for anybody who has an interest in creating and building something on EOSIO or EOS. It's actually a pretty good series. It kind of takes you through everything, and using some of the tools like EOS Studio and even just the terminal, understanding the structure of multi-index tables and user accounts and permissions, and it kind of goes through a quiz. It's actually a pretty good program, so I'd recommend that for you guys. That's probably about the only positive thing I could say. I was sort of hoping that they would also extend the tutorial time or the certification program time. I think right now it's only good till the end of January, which isn't really a lot of time. So I really think that they should really be doing everything in their power to encourage people to take up understanding how to build an EOS, not forcing them to pay for things. The other thing I know that was thrown out by Zach Gall, shout out to you, was this option to possibly pay for consulting services from Block 1. And in their publication, they mentioned that they give a early roadmap release or something with their products or something. So they definitely have some things, I think, in the cards. What that is, I have no idea. So we'll just have to continue to monitor it. But I think the community as a whole is sort of exhausted, and some of these issues with the governance, I think, have really hindered our focus, personally. Rezi says, explain the potential if we fix EOS mainnet. Well, I don't think I need to explain the potential. I think you guys all know what's possible, but it's just a question of, is there a willingness by all the participants to do that? And is that a priority? And a lot of folks think that it's the resources, and I still don't actually think that's the case, and I've already mentioned to you guys why tonight. So I'm sort of, I'm not sure that absolutely does it. We'll see, but Time will tell. But look out for, I guess, that conference they're going to do. I think it might even be free. You could register online for free on Eventbrite. And I wouldn't expect anything on the 14th. I know there's been some rumors about that, but I think that's just all Lambo boys, moon boys as they call them. So with that said, guys, I want to thank you for tuning in to this channel. If you like the content, hit that like button, consider subscribing to this channel. And until next time, guys, have yourself a lovely evening. And this is Phoenix signing off. Peace.